What's happening, everybody? Ryan Thomas here, live on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. It is a Tuesday night, almost said Wednesday night. It is a Tuesday night here live in studio in LKPT, diving into, of course, the biggest storyline of the day today for Buffalo sports fans, the news that shook up the Twitter sphere, Sabres Twitter in particular. Buffalo Sabres have made a decision to fire now former General Manager Jason Botterill, and will be moving forward with a new General Manager. Just like that, they go from Jason Botterill to Kevyn Adams, the new General Manager of the Buffalo Sabres. It feels like deja vu, in the words of Yogi Berra, deja vu all over again. At one Seymour Knox Plaza, as Terry and Kim Pegula have made the decision to go with their fourth different general manager since Terry bought the franchise back in 2011. A lot to take in here, a lot to dive into on the Thomas Take Sports Podcast, as I always like to do so on the show today. I'll be diving into this news from plenty of different angles, diving into this news with plenty of different takes, and providing you my theories on the quote-unquote new hierarchy of the Buffalo Sabres. So let's get right into it. General Manager Jason Botterill, the Jason Botterill era as General Manager of the Buffalo Sabres. Well, it's honestly shocking that it took the Buffalo Sabres this long to make this decision. I know these decisions are not easy. I know these decisions do have personal feelings towards Terry, I guess I should say, to Jason Botterill. These guys tried real hard to make it work inside the arena, off the ice, on the ice, putting the best coach, putting the best players on the ice for this team, and it just did not work. In fact, it never worked. There was never a glimmer of hope that it would work. Granted, you did have two instances where you had some win streaks, one to start a season, the next year. Those were only glimmers of hope in October hockey, when it's safe to say the teams that do well in October don't always do well in January, February, March, or even April. October hockey is a little bit different. Got a lot of these teams trying to get their legs into the game, get their legs underneath them. Coaches trying to figure out what players fit what lines the best. And more oftentimes than not, it takes some time for coaches to realize what players fit on which line. And I think that is just a few of the reasons why the Sabres had very, very successful Octobers, but not great January, February, March, or leading into the short month of April for NHL hockey. So Jason Botterill, to me, when I look at this tenure, I come to the first conclusion that he did not do a good job at his job. Obviously, that's why he was fired. But when I say that, it's not that he was not a great talent evaluator. It was not that he wasn't trying his hardest. I don't doubt that he tried. I don't doubt that he tried to put his best foot forward. His philosophy of putting his best foot forward, though, was very flawed. His philosophy as to how this Buffalo Sabres team would go from zero to hero was extremely flawed. And his philosophy, as far as putting his best foot forward to provide Buffalo Sabres fans with a team that they could root for and a team that they could respect, was so above and beyond ridiculously just inept that I don't really feel sorry for the fact that Jason Botterill lost his job today. And I say a lot of the time when I talk about other coaches and other GMs, I hate to call for their jobs, but if there was a case of any general manager deserving to be fired in recent memory, it would be Jason Botterill. And his inability to accumulate talent, to accumulate NHL talent as an NHL general manager, always baffled me. His ability to part ways with very adequate NHL talent and trade it away for more minor league assets on an organization that had a ton, almost overflowing with minor league talent. You wondered really what the next step was for GMJB. How are things going to get any better? How are things going to get better? If it wasn't now, it was soon. The writing to me was on the wall. And this morning, when I reacted to the news, I posted a Facebook video on Facebook Live for people to tune into, just giving my immediate thoughts on the matter, diving into it and saying to myself, I'm not shocked that he was fired, but what I am shocked by is that it didn't happen sooner. But hey, better late than never. They went down this path. They got him out the door. They made it happen. And I can't complain about that. I can only be thankful that they decided, hey, enough is enough. We've really tried to put our best foot forward with you as our GM, but when push comes to shove, your philosophy of building this team through the minor leagues, of building this team through young talent, we already have enough young talent. Now we need to add true NHL caliber players that can help us win games in the National Hockey League. This team is not in a moment of, well, we need to accumulate minor league talent and build on what we have. Spend the next 2-3 years building. No, we need to win. We need to win, and we need to win now. We need to win, and we need to win now for the sole purpose that we have a piss-poor hockey team with one of the 5 best players in the world on this roster. And when I look at the dynamics of how this team has become what it has become, and what I mean by that is going from hero to zero, being a team that was competing year in, year out in the playoffs, being a team that was going to the Eastern Conference Finals back-to-back, being a team that was looked at with respect in the National Hockey League, to a basement-dwelling, disrespected, basement-dwelling, just, and I said basement-dwelling twice, but just a complete mess of an organization that is nothing but organized. They are not organized in the slightest. Wondering the hierarchy of this organization is like reading a riddle. You don't understand it at first, takes you a little while to get it, but then you start to see just how inept this organization is, and that is the riddle. Then you're like, oh, you piece it together, it makes sense. Weird analogy, I know, but hey, that's how it happens. You wonder, how could Terry Pegula, who put his resources into the city first by buying the Buffalo Sabres, how could Terry let this franchise go down this path of complete and utter ineptitude as a National Hockey League team, tarnishing the brand, dare I say, of what the Buffalo Sabres actually are? Rather than building the Sabres into a team that the city of Buffalo could respect, he's only allowed the city of Buffalo to loathe what the Buffalo Sabres have become. And he is front and center in that whole operation. Every decision that he has made as owner of the Buffalo Sabres, outside of drafting Sam Reinhart, outside of drafting Jack Eichel, outside of drafting Rasmus Ristolainen, outside of drafting Rasmus Dahlin, has been a complete and total failure. A complete and total failure. And I some of these decisions, obviously, Dylan Cozens, I think, is going to be a really good player. But in terms of building up this organization, Terry Pegula has mightily failed in doing so, and in an epic, emphatically bad level. Promoting from within is a dynamic of this whole story that I think is also being lost on a lot of fans. But I'm going to dive into that in my own way. But first, let's stick to Terry. Terry's got this love for the Sabres. He's got this fanboy Sabres in him. You know, a little bit of Sabres fanboy in him as far as his years rooting for the Sabres with Perreault, with Rick Martin, René Robert, the French Connection, one of the greatest lines in National Hockey League history. He's got that pedigree. He's very much in tune with the franchise as far as his fandom goes. But the fandom has oftentimes bitten Terry Pegula in the ass. The fandom has gotten in the way of actually making fundamentally sound hockey smart decisions. And there you have Pat LaFontaine as president of hockey operations. You think that that's a respectable move. You go out, you hire him. That blows up in his face. In order to start talking about the present, we got to go back to the past. How did we get here? Where are we? Where are we going, Terry Pegula? Are we there yet, Terry Pegula? You bring in Pat LaFontaine. You bring in Tim Murray. They have a fundamental difference in whether Ryan Miller should remain on the roster. Pat LaFontaine, the U.S. red, white, and blue, tried and true American hockey legend that he was, recognized that Ryan Miller is a face on this franchise that we should never let walk out of One Seymour Knox Plaza. Tim Murray, on the other hand, wanted to maximize the juice that Ryan Miller had left and trade him away to a team that needed him, to a contender, and get something in return. Something, meaning anything in return. Settling, essentially, for the return. And that's what they did. Out goes Pat LaFontaine shortly thereafter. And the timeline of all these things, I know I won't get it all right because there's been so much that has really plagued this organization the last 9 to 10 years. But from letting Pat LaFontaine go, to hiring Phil Housley, to hiring Dan Bilesma prior to that, to firing Lindy Ruff, and allowing Ron Rolston to take the hollowed spot that once Lindy Ruff stood in, that Lindy Ruff once stood in, I should say. I mean, I could go on and on. And these are the frustrations that Sabres fans have every right to feel. These are the reasons why guys like Caller Dwayne exist. And rightfully so. There is no, oh, you're too mad. Oh, you're too upset. Oh, you need to think on the bright side. Honestly, F the bright side. F being happy. F it. F it. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. All of that is living in a fake reality. The reality is, the moment Terry Pegula purchased the Buffalo Sabres, he said that the sole existence of the Buffalo Sabres was to win the Stanley Cup. That banner is hanging in the Amherst Ale House. The Amherst Ale House has a special that half-price medium pizzas until the Buffalo Sabres win the Stanley Cup. Well, the Amherst Ale House is raking in a lot of money. They're doing really well. Phenomenal business. I suggest you check it out once this crazy world that we live in is over, but they're still serving tables outside, and they're taking orders 4 or 5 hours a day. God bless them. Awesome business. But they're going to have those medium pizzas on sale for a little while, I think. And rightfully so, because it serves the community, but on the back end of that, you have the fact that Sabres are still a cluster, you know what. So I think that all in all, you have the power structure of the Bills, Terry Pegula, Kim Pegula, but is it? No. You have Terry Pegula and Kim Pegula as the owners. You have a head coach and GM that are working in unison since day one, referred to oftentimes as McBean in Buffalo circles. Brandon Beane and Sean McDermott for the Buffalo Bills have been hand in hand. They do press conferences together. They go golfing together. They probably sit in the sauna together, and that's fine. That's great. But then you got the Sabres. you don't even know who their coach is in most days. One day it could be somebody else. The next day it could be somebody else. You don't even know who their GM is some years. You could talk to a hockey fan from Philadelphia or from Dallas or California maybe or whatever, and they'll say, well, who's the GM of the Sabres now? Who's the head coach? Because this team has been a carousel of GMs, coaches, scouts, and it's only continuing with Kevyn Adams being promoted from within. And I'm going to shift gears here now from Botterill. Jason Botterill, I wish you the best of luck, but man, you were terrible. I mean, there's no two ways about it. You wish someone well, you say au revoir. Unfortunately, it didn't work. It didn't happen. But that doesn't mean I wish Jason Botterill, that doesn't mean I'm going to say Jason Botterill did well. He was terrible. Awful. This team does not have a second-line center. This team has no scoring, hardly at all, outside of 6 players on the team. And they're all split up very weirdly throughout the season because the depth on this team is little to none. No clear-cut answer at goaltender. Linus Ullmark had some solid moments. Carter Hutton was awful for the Buffalo Sabres. Awful. And then you have a phenom from Finland in Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, who had hip surgery last year. I'm really hoping he can get healthy and work his way up the ladder in Rochester and get here. Get to Buffalo at the National Hockey League level, and let's see what this kid can do. But you're right back to square one. The last 4 years that you've spent with Jason Botterill inherited a team that was much better than the one that he left. And I'm not saying that I'm the biggest Tim Murray fan, but that is fact. Jason Botterill inherited a much better team than the one that he was just fired from. Both of those teams had Jack Eichel, and that's about it. It was painfully obvious that Rasmus Dahlin would be that pick. That's the biggest acquisition that Jason Botterill made to the team. Rasmus Dahlin. Nylander Jokiharju trade somewhat worked out for Buffalo, but outside of that, I mean, Jason Botterill, you can't really gloat about Jason Botterill. Jeff Skinner had a banner season for Buffalo last year. This year, didn't even know where he was on the ice half the time. Is Jeff Skinner playing right now? I can't tell. He vanished in stretches of the season. October, November, solid. The rest, not so much. So that has to be tapped back into. They have to find out what the hell went wrong there. But I think what could be taking place here at One Seymour Knox Plaza is a change, not just in the general manager and Kevyn Adams, but in the hierarchy of the Buffalo Sabres, the power hierarchy. What I mean by that is, who is the top man on the totem pole of the Buffalo Sabres? Obviously, you have the owners, Terry and Kim Pegula, as they are for the Buffalo Sabres, but Terry and Kim have largely let GM Brandon Beane and head coach Sean McDermott of the Buffalo Bills run the show. Now, I think what is taking place is actually a transfer of power from not Jason Botterill to Kevyn Adams, but from Jason Botterill to Ralph Krueger and then Kevyn Adams. I think the Kevyn Adams hire is decent in this aspect. Decent in the aspect that Ralph Krueger is a player that the players really, or is a coach that the players really respect. The players never talked about Phil Housley like they do about Ralph Krueger. The players never talked about Dan Bilesma the way that they talk about Ralph Krueger. So that is encouraging. That is very encouraging. That is, dare I say, the silver lining of the 2019-2020 pandemic-shortened season for the Buffalo Sabres is that, yes, Ralph Krueger is looked at as a positive. Maybe they did get that right. We got more time to develop that thought, but I've been encouraged by Ralph Krueger. I like Ralph Krueger a lot. I hope that it works out for him here. That's a guy that I can root for. That's a guy that is honest. professional, sincere, motivating, and willing to do one thing and one thing only, and that's simply go to work. Not talking about it, not talking about talent. Turn talent into results. That's the job of a coach, and the job of the GM is to provide the coach with the players that he wants. I think Kevyn Adams will do that for Ralph Krueger. I think in terms of Adams as far as whether he's qualified for the general manager job or not, Ralph Krueger has experienced running, the higher end of things in sports, whether it was a soccer team or not. He knows what it's like to run more day-to-day operations. I think Ralph Krueger can teach Kevyn Adams a few things, and I think Kevyn Adams can teach Ralph Krueger a few things. Kevyn Adams is a pretty accomplished NHL player. Did he have 50 goals in a season? No. But did he play 11 years on a few different clubs and be an impact player? I would say so. An 11-year NHL career is a pretty solid career. A career that Jason Botterill never had, as Botterill was really a career minor leaguer, a goon, not really looked at as the enforcer of all enforcers, but would scrap, and not really all that well. So I think Kevyn Adams, in those aspects, is a very unique and interesting hire. And obviously, I have to throw this out there, and this does matter. The fact that Kevyn Adams was a Clarence native, born and raised in Western New York, and has a love for the Sabres. That is important to me. To me, as a fan, that excites me, because the interest is there from Adams to the Buffalo Sabres, and from Adams to the Buffalo Sabres fans, that, hey, I want to really right this ship. I really want to get things on the right path. I want to put the Sabres forward. I want to do what I need to do to make the Sabres a contender again. And that is where the Sabres belong. The National Hockey League is worse off with the Buffalo Sabres in the bottom 7, 8 in the National Hockey League. It's been too long. Going on a 10, 11-year playoff drought for the Buffalo Sabres. It has to change. We have to steer the ship down the right path at some point. Hopefully that's sooner rather than later. And Jack Eichel, the leader, the guy that has put the team on his back for the last 5 years, since he stepped down from his plane or bus in Buffalo, day he first visited the city as a member of the team in 2015 as a second overall draft choice, Jack Eichel deserves better. And hopefully Kevyn Adams and Ralph Krueger provide him with that. And hopefully Jack Eichel is vocal in who he wants for this franchise to make this franchise what it needs to be. Jack Eichel deserves that. Jack Eichel has done more than enough to deserve the right to speak up and say, hey, I want this guy, I want this guy, I want this guy. Somewhat of a LeBron James effect on the Buffalo Sabres taking place from Jack Eichel. That's what I want from Jack Eichel more than anything, because Jack Eichel is the franchise player. He does have the right to pick the brain of the coach and the GM and say, what are we really doing here, guys? Because he's been through enough in half of a decade as a member of the Buffalo Sabres, more than enough. They're far behind. Meanwhile, Jack Eichel is only getting better and better. Meanwhile, only the discussions in Buffalo continue to rise as to whether or not Jack Eichel will finish his career as a member of the Buffalo Sabres. When will Jack Eichel start demanding a trade? Those discussions have already started in Buffalo. It is because this organization has been a dumpster fire. Dumpster fire to the city of Buffalo, a dumpster fire to the fans, a dumpster fire to Jack Eichel. We can only hope for the best and expect the worst, really. And I say that with, honestly, pain. It pains me to say that, because this team means a lot to the fans of Buffalo. This team means a lot to the city. The memories of excellence within this franchise's history are sewn into the memories of each and every one of us. Each one of us can take a piece from our generation and say, this moment was when the Sabres were successful when I was a kid. This moment was when the Sabres did this, and it made me, I remember where I was, and it made me feel happy. It made me feel this, feel that. What can kids say about the Buffalo Sabres the last 10 years? What can kids say? Well, that's my hockey team. That's the team that represents where I'm from. Isn't that a shame? You really hope to see things turn around. You have to hope for the best. I truly hope the best for Kevyn Adams, for Ralph Kruger. I greatly hope that this is the tandem that does it. This is the tandem that brings the Sabres back to where they need to be. But until it's proven, I can't believe in it quite yet. Folks, my name is Ryan Thomas. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the Thomas Take Sports Podcast. As always, I greatly enjoy doing this. This podcast has been around for about 4 or 5 years now, 4 years, and it has been a true blessing in my life, one of my favorite hobbies, my true passion, posting sports content for the sports fans all around the world, whether they're NHL fans, whether they're NFL fans, mixed martial arts fans, boxing fans, baseball fans. Always something to talk about from my voice to your ears, my face to your eyes on some occasions. You'll expect more live video coverage of this podcast, and I can't wait to bring it to you. And I think that onward and upward for the Thomas Take. It's going to be a very fun 2020, and I can't wait to continue it. So thank you so much for tuning in. If you want, you can follow me on Twitter at Ryan Thomas Take. You can also follow me on Instagram at Ryan Thomas Take. The Thomas Take Sports Podcast is also available on Facebook, and you can find me on Facebook as well. Feel free to throw me an ad, Ryan Thomas, on Facebook. So thank you so much for tuning in, everybody. Take care, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you soon.